August 1944. The French countryside is choking under the suffocating clouds of war and the acrid stench of cordite. This is no longer a battle of attrition. It is a one-sided, relentless surge that is rewriting the map of Europe with the deafening roar of tanked Reds. Deep inside the operational headquarters of the German High Command, an atmosphere of absolute panic and despair has taken hold. Unable to stem the bleeding across their collapsing defensive lines, the German generals fixate their terrified gaze on a single name, rapidly tearing across their maps: the United States Third Army, commanded by the maestro of mechanized warfare, General George S. Patton. To halt this unstoppable tide of American steel, the German brass authorized a desperate all minus or minus or minus or minus nothing gamble. They would deploy their ultimate trump card, a weapon wrapped in an aura of sheer invincibility. They sent exactly 70 Tiger heavy tanks directly into Patton's path. The Germans naively believed that these 70 mechanical beasts, possessing apocalyptic firepower and impenetrable armor, would form an unbreakable wall of iron, crushing the American advance under their massive tracks. Yet, history was about to deliver one of its most brutal and astonishing reversals. This elite armored force, the absolute pinnacle of World War II military engineering, would be systematically annihilated in a shockingly brief window of time. By the time the sun dipped below the blood-soaked horizon, fewer than 10 of those 70 Invincible Tigers remained operational. Over 20 were reduced to burning pyres or abandoned in the mud before the first day was even over. What manner of military witchcraft did Patton employ to slaughter Nazi Germany's most prized leviathaness with such terrifying ease? To unravel this mystery, we must first step back into the grim reality of 1940 and understand the bottomless, paralyzing fear that the Tiger tank instilled in every Allied soldier who had the misfortune of crossing its path. On the battlefields of Europe, the Panzerkampfwagen V I Tiger was not merely a weapon. It was the physical manifestation of the Grim Reaper, a rolling fortress of doom. Tipping the scales at a staggering 56 tons, it was draped in incredibly thick, specially forged steel armor that made it virtually impenetrable from the front. When Allied armored columns stumbled upon a Tiger, a cold dread would instantly grip every crew member. For the standard American Sherman tank, their 75mm armor-piercing shells would simply bounce off the Tiger's frontal glacis plate, ringing out with a sickening metallic ping that signaled absolute futility. It was a soul-crushing realization that your best punch was nothing more than an annoyance to the enemy. Conversely, the Tiger was armed with the infamous 88mm gun, originally designed as a lethal anti-aircraft weapon. Modified for tank warfare, this monstrous can unpossessed a range and penetrative power that defied belief. It could easily punch through a Sherman tank from miles away, long before the American crew even had the German behemoth within their own effective firing range. One squeeze of the trigger, and an Allied tank was instantly transformed into a blazing iron coffin. The brutal mathematics of the battlefield dictated a horrifying exchange rate. It routinely cost the lives of 4 or 5 Sherman tanks just to overwhelm and destroy a single Tiger. Furthermore, the Tiger's true terrifying potential was unlocked when it assumed a defensive posture. Hidden hull down behind the rolling terrain or thick hedgerows, exposing only its lethal 88mm gun to the open ground, its dominance was absolute. On paper, 72 of these monsters, dug and unweighting, were more than enough to turn any massive armored offensive into a slaughterhouse. But General George S. Patton was no ordinary commander, and he certainly was not one to play by the rules dictated by his enemies. He was a visionary of speed and a conductor of extreme, calculated violence. Patton had thoroughly dissected the German armored doctrine. He understood the mythos of the Tiger, but his hawk-like gaze pierced through the propaganda to see the fatal vulnerabilities hidden beneath its terrifying exterior. He recognized that while the Tiger possessed unmatched firepower and armor, its mobility was an absolute disaster. On paved roads, it struggled to reach 25 miles per hour, and in the treacherous, muddy, off-road conditions of rural France, it crawled at an agonizing pace, making rapid retreats or pursuits virtually impossible. More critically, the mechanical complexity required to move 56 tons of steel was staggering. Its engine and transmission were over-engineered and notoriously unreliable, acting as a ticking time bomb of mechanical failure. To make matters worse, it was an insatiable glutton for fuel, burning through nearly a gallon of precious gasoline for every half-mile traveled. Armed with this forensic breakdown of his enemy, Patton refused to feed his men into the meat grinder of a frontal assault. Instead, he formulated a ruthless, five-pillared tactical doctrine designed specifically to hunt and exterminate the Tigers, a strategy that would dissect the German pride piece by piece. The first and most uncompromising law of Patton's anti-Tiger doctrine was a strict prohibition against fighting on the enemy's terms. The German commanders prayed for open field, long-range duels where their 88mm guns could slaughter Americans with impunity. Patton's counter-minus-order was absolute: deny them the duel. He commanded his armored units to fight like packs of starving wolves, maximizing the dense French bocage, the rolling hills, and the winding, shadowed country lanes. American tanks were ordered to execute massive flanking maneuvers out of the enemy's line of sight, utilizing terrain and thick screens of smoke to close the physical distance. They were to bypass the impenetrable frontal armor entirely, slipping in close to deliver lethal strikes directly into the Tiger's thinner side and rear armor. This maneuver completely stripped the German 88mm gun of its standoff advantage, dragging the invincible beasts into the chaotic, close-quarters brawls where American numbers and turret traverse speed could dominate. Patton's second pillar transformed a simple tank battle into a three-dimensional nightmare for the Germans, the relentless application of combined arms. In Patton's symphony of destruction, a Sherman tank would never face a Tiger alone. When a Tiger was spotted, an overwhelming deluge of multi-layered firepower would instantly descend upon its coordinates. Massive batteries of heavy artillery would be the first to roar, churning the earth around the German positions. Simultaneously, the sky would tear open as close air support fighters dove in for the kill. On the ground, highly mobile, specialized tank destroyers and heavily armed infantry would close the net. This coordinated 360-degree avalanche of violence plunged the elite German tank crews into a state of sensory overload and panic. The lethal threat was no longer just in front of them. It was raining from the clouds, tearing through the flanks, and erupting from every conceivable blind spot. The third pillar of this ruthless strategy was a strike directly at the enemy's jugular, the absolute eradication of their logistical lifeline. Patton knew that the Tiger's horrifying fuel consumption was its Achilles heel. The Third Reich was already bleeding dry of petroleum, and these heavy battalions guzzled fuel at an unsustainable rate. Patton realized that punching through steel was difficult, but suffocating the engine was easy. He unleashed his reconnaissance and tactical strike aircraft deep behind enemy lines, hunting down German fuel depots, ammunition dumps, and any supply convoy attempting to reach the front. It was a brilliant, venomous strategy. Without a constant flow of fuel, the most terrifying tanks on Earth became nothing more than 56-ton paperweights. They would sputter, stall, and die on the roads before ever firing a shot in anger, ultimately being abandoned by their own crews. Destroying the fuel was infinitely more efficient than fighting the tanks. The fourth principle was the very essence of Patton's philosophy: never stop moving. In his tactical playbook, standing still was a death sentence. The Tiger was apex predator in a static defense. If you stopped to trade shots, you died. But if you maintained a frenetic, unpredictable, and high-speed tempo, constantly shifting the axis of attack, you forced the Germans to react. You forced them to constantly abandon their prepared positions, pack up, and retreat to establish new lines. And it was exactly here that Patton used the Tiger's own weight to kill it. Under the immense strain of constant tactical repositioning, sudden turns, and desperate road marches, the frail mechanical heart of the Tiger shattered. Engines overheated and seized highly complex transmissions literally exploded under the stress. Scores of Tigers never even saw an American tank. They simply ground to a halt, crippled by their own mechanical failures, leaving the crews stranded in the path of the advancing Allied juggernaut. The fifth and perhaps most sobering pillar of Patton's strategy revealed the cold, mathematical calculus of a master battlefield commander, the grim acceptance of necessary casualties. It is an agonizing reality for any general to lose soldiers, but Patton knew that attempting a bloodless victory against an enemy as lethal as the Tiger Battalion was a fatal illusion. Commanders who paused the advance to preserve every single tank, who hesitated to find the perfect angle of attack, gave the Germans the one thing they desperately needed: time. Time to dig in, time to repair broken tracks, time to bring up fuel. If the advance stalled, the next assault would cost 10 times the blood. Therefore, Patton's logic was brutal but undeniable. Pressure had to be absolute and unrelenting. Yes, Shermans would burn, and good men would die in the vanguard. But as long as the momentum of the entire army never broke, as long as the Germans were forever caught off balance, those localized sacrifices would save thousands of lives in the grand strategic picture. It was a terrifyingly pragmatic approach to war. Armed with this flawless, merciless doctrine, the Americans met the German heavy armor. While the Germans were still attempting to rigidly establish their textbook defensive lines, American reconnaissance ghosts had already painted targets on all 72 Tigers. Instead of a cautious probe, Patton's Third Army unleashed hell. They didn't line up to be shot. They saturated the German grid coordinates with an apocalyptic artillery barrage. The goal wasn't to pierce the Tiger's armor with high explosives. That was unlikely. The goal was total suppression. The deafening shockwaves, the flying shrapnel, and the blinding smoke forced the German commanders to slam their heavy steel hatches shut. The moment those hatches closed, the Tigers were completely blind, deafened to the battlefield, entirely ignorant of where the true American thrust was coming from. As the Tigers sat, buttoned up and bewildered in the smoke, the sky began to scream. P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers, armed to the teeth with rockets and heavy bombs, plunged from the clouds. They specifically targeted the thin top armor of the heavy tanks. Even a near miss from a 500-pound bomb was enough to violently shatter the Tiger's delicate suspension or blow off its tracks, rendering it a stationary pillbox. Meanwhile, using the chaos, the noise, and the smoke as a cloak, lightning-fast American tank destroyers, mounting heavy guns far deadlier than the standard Sherman, slipped completely around the German flanks. Like assassins in the dark, they waited in the tree lines until they had the perfect, flat-side shots against the vulnerable armor of the Tigers, ready to execute them at point-blank range. Caught in this suffocating web of aerial bombardment, blinding artillery, and devastating flanking fire, the Invincible German heavy battalion began to disintegrate. Their massive 88mm guns were useless because they couldn't see what to shoot at. Their impenetrable frontal armor was irrelevant because the killing blows were coming from the sides and the sky. Desperate to avoid total encirclement, the German commanders ordered a fighting retreat. But that order was the final nail in the coffin. As the massive tanks tried to pivot and flee through the mud, the mechanical plague struck. Transmissions whined and snapped. Engines burst into flames, and worst of all, the fuel gauges dropped to zero. Patton's aircraft had already vaporized the supply trucks miles away. Stranded, surrounded by the deafening roar of the American advance, the elite German crews faced the ultimate humiliation. To prevent their state-of-the-art machines from falling into Allied hands, they rigged their own tanks with high explosives. With tears of rage and despair, they blew their legendary Tigers to pieces, abandoning the flaming wreckage in the French dirt as they fled on foot back toward the fatherland. In less than 6 hours, the unstoppable wall of 72 Tigers was completely erased. By nightfall of the very first day of contact, over 20 were confirmed destroyed or abandoned. When the smoke finally cleared days later, fewer than 10 remained functional. And the most chilling detail of all, Patton's Third Army never even slowed down. They simply drove their Shermans right past the burning carcasses of Germany's greatest mechanical achievement, pushing relentlessly onward. This battle remains a masterclass in military history, proving once and for all that superior technology, without superior tactics and reliable logistics, is nothing but a spectacularly engineered coffin. Patton shattered the myth of the Tiger not with thicker armor, but with speed, combined arms, and a relentless, predatory mindset that ground the German war machine into dust. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history's deadliest miscalculations, smash that like button and subscribe. I'm your strategy observer. I'll see you on the next battlefield.